Good morning. My name is Carol DeAndres, and I am the Stakeholder and Public Engagement Manager on the Master Plan for Aging team at the California Department of Aging. I'm happy to be with you here today for the Implementing the Master Plan for Aging in California Together, or IMPACT, IMPACT Stakeholder Committee. Today is April 25th, 2024. And this is the committee's second meeting for 2024. Next slide, Callie. And thank you. I am Carol DeAndres. And I would like to go ahead and go over a few logistics as everyone starts to log on. This is a webinar, and we do have American Sign Language available, streamed through the webinar. And we also have closed captioning available to you through your Zoom functions. The meeting slides, transcript, and recording will be posted to the IMPACT webpage on the Cal HHS, the California Health and Human Services Master Plan for Aging webpage. And again, IMPACT members, if you've yet to update your name, please do so, but I think we're all good there. Next slide. I want to go over a few of virtual meeting operations. The chat function is enabled for committee members and the California Department of Aging staff and state staff. Invited guests to share out information and resources. The public's able to view that information contained in the chat. The chat and the question and answer functions are not enabled for comments and questions from public attendees. But we do invite the public to provide comments during the public comment period on the agenda. So please hold those comments until the end of the meeting. So thank you very much. And of course, you can give your public comments and questions anytime to the Engage email box, engage@aging.ca.gov. The next slide. We do want to go over the logistics for public comment. Attendees by phone can press *9. That will raise a hand and we will unmute your line. And attendees joining by the webinar, the Zoom function, click the raised hand icon that will indicate to us to unmute your line. We do note that public commenters will have 2 minutes so that we're able to get everyone's public comment. And again, as always, you may send your written comments to the Engage email box, engage@aging.ca.gov. I want to go over the purpose of the IMPACT Committee. The purpose of implementing the master plan in California Together, IMPACT Stakeholder Committee, is to advise the California Health and Human Services Agency on the implementation of the Master Plan for Aging, focusing on accountability, outcomes, and continuous improvement towards the plan's 5 bold goals for 2030. And of course, we could not accomplish this the purpose of this committee without the committee members. And we thank our committee for lending their time, their expertise, and their passion for the Master Plan for Aging to advance aging, disability, and caregiver for the whole of society, whole of government approach that is the Master Plan for Aging. So again, we do thank you for your incredible time that you devote and to this effort. So this is our meeting agenda. We do have opening remarks, and we will be featuring Secretary Moss. So I will, without ado, I will turn it over to our Director of California Department of Aging, Susan DeMorris. And please go ahead, Susan. Good morning.
Good morning, Carol. Thanks for opening up the meeting and leading us all off. And hello to everyone joining us. Welcome back to our IMPACT Committee members. Without any further delay, I wanted to introduce all of you to an outstanding new leader in our in the world of the Master Plan for Aging. Governor Newsom recently appointed Secretary Moss to lead the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency. Secretary Moss may be a familiar face to some of you who have known and worked with her in her long tenure in housing in the Bay Area. She also served as a member of the California Interagency Council on Homelessness. She served as a member on that body and now has been elevated to secretary, a fantastic leader prior to being appointed secretary and now as secretary. And I just really want to personally thank Secretary Moss for giving us just a few minutes today to say hello and to welcome her into her new role that is so critically important to older adults, people with disabilities, and family caregivers. Secretary Moss, welcome and thank you for joining us briefly to say hello this morning.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Susan. Good morning, everyone. I really am thrilled to start your meeting this morning just in gratitude. As Susan said, I've been at this work a really long time, 2 decades in California, working on a variety of issues as they relate to housing, homelessness, just economic prosperity for vulnerable residents across the Bay Area, both in local government and in the nonprofit sector. And as I step into this role, it's so critically important that we look at what's happening for our elders. I am someone who was raised by my grandmother. I am someone who has been in this work for a really long time and seeing the challenges for our elders increasing over time as we all experience inflation, and we see how many folks are vulnerable to income inequality and economic insecurity. We know that this is disproportionately affecting older adults. And I am so inspired. I know of the Master Plan on Aging from my previous role, but now being able to sit in the secretary seat and figure out how BCSH can continue to be a partner in this work to really look at the implementation of this work is so exciting to me. I loved the opening that Carol referred to around outcomes and accountability, right? It's one thing to talk about our intent. It's another thing to deliver on ending and preventing homelessness for older adults in the state of California. And that is absolutely something that I am committed to, that my team is committed to, and that the governor is committed to. It is tragic to me that we have elders who have been stably housed in their communities for a really long time, and now their Social Security benefits no longer allow them to afford their permanent housing that they've been living in for a really long time. And so the just dramatic increase of that vulnerability is something that we want to address with urgency. So I'm really excited to be in partnership with all of you. As Susan said, I sat on Cal ICH as a council member and now have the honor of being one of the co-chairs with Secretary Galley. And I think we have a unique opportunity to advance the goals of this plan in partnership with all of our other member agencies on the council, CDA, DHCS, DSS, there's so many acronyms, DOR, right? Like all of those partners are on the council and ready to get engaged around driving toward those outcomes that you all have identified in this plan. And so I am ready. I'm rolling my sleeves up. I am acting with a sense of urgency. The governor has been telling us we're going to push through the tape. We're not going to walk over the finish line. We're going to run over the finish line, and I'm up for the charge. So I would love to come back to you all in the summer after the budget process has concluded to really talk about strategically what can we do together, how can BCSH support these efforts to drive towards some of these goals. It is unacceptable to me that we have allowed so many of our neighbors to experience homelessness across the state, and even with despite our best efforts, the inflows into homelessness are outpacing our exits, and we have got to figure out how we first prevent homelessness from happening in the first place, and then resolve that housing crisis for our elders as quickly as we can. So I thank you for the invitation to welcome you, and so look forward to working with each and every one of you in this fight that we can win. I am 100% convinced, and it starts with a good plan, which you all have, and now it's about implementation. So thank you for your partnership. I appreciate it, and I'll turn it back to you, Susan.
Thank you, Secretary Moss, very much for joining us. I know how busy your time is. And you started with a message of gratitude. We're incredibly grateful that the governor appointed you into this critical role at this critical time. And we just so appreciate your partnership and your incredible staff team's partnership, whether it's in the agency or with the Cal ICH. You just have a tremendous staff, and they're great partners in this work. So we look forward to continuing the conversation with you in the months and years ahead in your important role. Thank you for joining
so
us.
much.
We really appreciate it. All right. And now we will move, Carol will bring, there we go. Thanks so much. Our next agenda item is we will be turning, oops, we can skip this one, Carol. Or actually, do we have time? Shall we go through with that? Does that keep us on track?
Yes, please go ahead, Susan. Thank
All
you.
right. So just a quick rundown of things since we last met as a committee. Of course, by now the governor's January 10 budget proposal is in the rearview mirror as we're all looking ahead in the next couple of weeks to the release of the May revise with updated fiscal estimates and any changes that may be coming. So you're all familiar and have communicated well. Continue to communicate with us on individual, organizational, and collective priorities in the budget. We want to hear from all of you, especially once the May revise is released. I wanted to remind you of the California Health and Human Services Agency program priorities and encourage you to take a look at those. We'll share them. There they are in the chat. Look at our amazing team. You've all seen by now the Master Plan for Aging third annual report to the legislature, and we'll be talking quite a bit about that today later in our agenda with your response to that report. Also in January, the Little Hoover Commission put out a very thoughtful report on the Master Plan for Aging, and we're just very impressed by their focused attention on the master plan, having held a full day hearing on the plan itself and a second full day hearing on the very issues you just heard from Secretary Moss about older adult housing and homelessness. And that report is forthcoming probably sometime this summer from what we've heard from the Little Hoover Commission. We also concluded something that we've shared with this group is the California Department of Aging's California 2030 final report. This is how we have been working over the last year and a half or so to really strengthen the California Aging Network, our network of 33 area agencies on aging, so that we can adapt to the new normal. What we have today in 2024 is very different from the network that was first established 50 years ago. And we know that the network will look dramatically different in the years ahead. We also need to conform with the Administration for Community Living's final rule put out in February of just this year. So we need to make some reforms. So you'll see all of that in the California 2030 report, and there is legislation that's been introduced by Senator Roth, SB 1249, that advances some of the recommendations in that report. We're thrilled, and I apologize if you've heard some of this good news already, but we're thrilled to have been selected. California was chosen as a national housing accelerator. We are working with Secretary Moss and her team, and of course, many of the departments within the Health and Human Services Agency. This is an example of cross-agency work that's has just begun. And then exciting new development, Proposition 1 was approved by California voters, and we are already rolling up our sleeves and working across departments and to see how that we can be most impactful with implementation of Proposition 1 and how we can prepare and equip the aging network, the disability community to be beneficiaries of the new resources and the new design of the Mental Health Services Act. So we're really thrilled that we're already talking with philanthropic partners about how we can develop tools and training to really help the aging network mobilize and move quickly on all of the changes that Proposition 1 has brought about. So with that, I think that's a quick listing. And then Sarah, we were going to ask you to also talk a little bit about, is Sarah here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
thank you.
Great. Sarah's going to share a little bit about our long-term services and support system change efforts that cut across all of our departments and agencies. Take it away,
Yes.
Sarah.
Thank you, Susan. I'll be very brief because we have, highlighted this work in meetings past, but I think it's always good to put it to the forefront just to really show how we're trying to focus on reforming our long-term services and support system so that we truly can create a home and community care system for all. And we have 4 key initiatives, groupings here, focusing on navigation, and that's how people actually find the information that they need to make informed choices. And in that area, we've done a lot of work to stand up a No Wrong Door State Leadership Council. And as part of that effort, we are looking into the development of a consumer-facing web portal and contact center that would be available on a statewide basis to help people make informed choices when they need it. And second, the issue of access. So even if we streamline how people find the information, we need to actually make sure people can access the services that they need. We do know that our home and community-based services system across both Medi-Cal and non-Medi-Cal services, there is not necessarily statewide access across the system. So we are advancing the Home and Community-Based Services Gap Analysis and Roadmap Initiative in partnership with the Department of Healthcare Services. They are leading the Medi-Cal Home and Community-Based Services Gap Analysis, and we are leading the non-Medi-Cal Home and Community-Based Services Gap Analysis in partnership with all of our Cal HHS agencies or Cal HHS departments that offer these services to older adults, people with disabilities, and caregivers. Later this year, the gap analysis will be released. And after following that, by next summer, we will be releasing the roadmap, which is a really critical component to outline how we are going to get to where we need to be to ensure statewide access. Third, we know that even if we've ensured access to services and have a more streamlined navigation system, we know that we have to support and build our direct care workforce. So there are a number of initiatives that we are implementing in partnership with our other Cal HHS departments, as well as the Labor and Workforce Development Agency, to both build the workforce pipeline and provide training and incentives to support the direct care workers in the important critical work they do. And this also includes our California's 5 million unpaid family caregivers. So a number of initiatives directed at that population as well. Finally, and very importantly, even if we've addressed these other critical components of the system, we know that Californians are suffering in terms of their ability to pay for long-term services and supports. This really is a significant issue impacting, as we all know, something you all have elevated, the missing middle or the forgotten middle, that's the population that's not eligible for any state-funded services. And how might we engage in different policies that can meet the needs of this? We are really excited to be advancing a $5 million initiative right now, where we're going to be looking at population analytics, building off some of the important work that has been done by our partners to understand the needs of this population now and into the future, and then outlining some really critical policy opportunities for the states to move forward on. We're also very excited to be exploring where Medicare might play a role in this space, and are in the process of developing some options for a potential proposal that is to submit to the Federal Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation to look at a way to pilot a Medicare home and community-based services demonstration in the state. So more information on that, but we're really excited to be working on all of these initiatives in partnership with our stakeholders. So I will turn it back to you, Susan.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Appreciate that. And at this point, we will turn the agenda over. I gotta say, I just love this practice. And this is an example where stakeholders bring something that wasn't contemplated, where the initiative of the Impact Committee a few years ago, when the first annual report came out, was to do a response to the report. And I just want to thank you for continuing that practice. I recognize it is not easy for you to pour over the report, to work together as a group, to analyze it and so thoughtfully respond. But the rest, we've got a good chunk of the agenda now for Kevin and the Impact Committee members to share their thoughts and thinking with us. And then we have time on the agenda. Marco Meach is joining us from the California Health and Human Services Agency, so we'll have time to have a discussion after you present. Kevin, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Susan, and to the whole CDA team and Marco and everybody at Cal HHS and Darcy. Thanks so much for giving us this time in the agenda today. I want to thank all of the Impact Committee members. This was a group effort that we put together this annual report on the third year of MPA implementation. The report is going to be disseminated shortly after the meeting through Justice and Aging channels, through channels of other Impact Committee members, and then hopefully CDA is able to share it with MPA stakeholders as well. The report has 3 sections this time. The first section is a bit of appreciation, as well as a plea to make sure that we continue to maintain the investments in the MPA to date that have moved the state forward so far and have started to impact lives across the state. The second section asks for continued and even increased prioritization of 2 key topics. The first is building a home care system for all Californians, and the second is preventing and ending older adult homelessness in California. And then the third section includes really specific 7 specific recommendations that go beyond the current activities under the MPA that we think would move forward those 2 priorities in the next year. Across both the identification of those 2 key issues and the 7 recommendations, you will see us in the report and in our presentation today talk about equity. We think that these 2 issues are important, or amongst the most, if not the most important, for addressing inequity as it shows up for older people. And we think our recommendations are really key to advancing and addressing those inequities that exist today and building a more equitable California for all, building a more equitable aging system for all. You're going to hear from me a little bit about that first section about maintaining investments in aging and people with disabilities. And then you're going to hear from a variety of Impact Committee members as we work through the rest of the substance of the report. But why don't I go ahead and jump in to say that the Impact Committee continues to be very grateful and appreciative of the governor, of all the different agencies, especially HHS's leadership, but all the different agencies work on the MPA, and for the legislators' commitment to the MPA as well. Because of the positive budget situation in the first 3 years of MPA implementation, we saw incredible investments in our communities, and many of those investments are just now or have recently really started to hit people's lives. Expansions of healthcare benefits, expansions of workforce programs, expansions of economic security programs and housing supports that have really changed people's lives. So we're deeply appreciative for that. We also understand that the fiscal condition of the state has shifted and has become a difficult fiscal situation. And we appreciate that in the governor's January budget, he proposed maintaining investments in the MPA, maintaining investments in aging and disability programs, and those are really critical. And we're mindful that the MPA was created as a roadmap, not just for when there's an opportunity to spend, but also times when there were fiscal downturns in the state. And the commitment to aging, the commitment to people with disabilities, we expect to be there regardless of the fiscal situation that the state is undergoing. So we urge the governor and the legislature to maintain that commitment to older adults and people with disabilities, and to renew their support for recent expansions of programs and services under the MPA. And we ask that the governor and the legislature refuse to look to older adults and people with disabilities and their families to bear the brunt of any budget shortfall that the state is facing this year. Keep in mind that by 2030, 30% of the state will be 60 or older. And with that aging is going to come the need for more supports at home and in the community. Older adults of color are projected to make up 50% of the aging population in 2030. Latino older adults will make up 26% of the aging population by 20 or 30. So these issues are equity issues in our communities. So we are recommending that the state continue to deepen and definitely not pull back from its investment in aging, particularly looking to make key structural reforms that are going to set California up for success over these next now 6 years until we hit that important 2030 mark. If we delay investments or roll back investments now, it's ultimately just going to cost the state more over that long term. Our state is going to grow older, whether we're providing those services or not. So those expenses are going to be bared by our families, our communities, our economy, if we're not proactively preparing for them and investing in them today. California has truly been a model for the country in its master plan for aging, and it needs to maintain these commitments in order to continue to be that model. So we're very grateful for what's happened so far. We're really, as we look to that May revise, looking very carefully at ensuring that the services that are provided today are protected. And then we think, to move into our second section of our report, we think we're at a really crucial transition point. We're in an area where we're in our fourth year of the MPA. We're now in the middle ages of the MPA process, and we need to start thinking about what we've accomplished, where we are now, and what we need to do next to make sure we want to end up where we want to be at the end of this 10-year master plan for aging. So we have a chance to reflect. We know that this is not a year where there's going to be big new spending, but we think this is the year where we need to be asking the hard questions of what types of structural reforms, what type of investments do we need to plan for now so that we can deliver on the back half of this plan. And as the Impact Committee asked itself this question, we were looking at a number of things. We were looking at the equity issues. We were looking at the growing awareness around the issue of the forgotten middle, those who are struggling to afford growing older in California. There's more and more people that can't afford the cost of long-term care, of home care, of housing. And we're seeing that play out in our communities with rising rates of older adult homelessness, as well as more and more older adults and their families struggling to afford long-term care, and particularly care at home. So as we think as an Impact Committee about what those key issues are that need the most focus right now to make sure that we can deliver on the promises of the MPA, they are, as I started with, building a home care system that works for all Californians and preventing and ending older adult homelessness. So that's where we're going to spend most of our time now today, talking about those two issues. I'm going to kick it to Nancy and Eric Dowdy to talk first about building a home care system that works for all Californians.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Hi, I'm Eric Dowdy with the Alzheimer's Association, so I'm happy to kind of lead us off on this discussion. So as Kevin noted, we are at a decision point, I think, with LTSS financing, and we think that we are in an area of time with the plan that we're ready to act. And we need a firm commitment on how to move forward on an LTSS proposal. So we're very thankful for the efforts that have already been completed, especially with CalAIM, with the enhanced care management and community supports. We think that's been very beneficial. We have the new LTSS dashboard. We have the modest expansions of the slots of the assisted living waiver. And we're also working on, as Sarah mentioned, the HCBS roadmap, the gap analysis, and then the No Wrong Door initiative. I think all of these things are getting us closer to where we want to be, but we really are, I think, at a decision point. As Kevin noted, we are trying to reach that missing middle, the forgotten middle, or the near duals. It's that pocket of individuals who are not wealthy to be able to pay out of their pockets, but then also don't qualify for Medi-Cal services. We have noted that a lot of the work done has been to analyze and digest proposals. We think that we are now at a point where we are able to list those and prioritize them into a system that might work. So the big question we have now to answer is, will these proposals turn into real and new programs or benefits for older adults with disabilities? So I'm going to turn it over to Nancy, who's going to talk a little bit about the need for a sustainable system. And I'll just let her take the actual ask of the committee that you'll find on page 5 of the document, I believe. So Nancy, over to you.
Thanks, Eric. The Impact Committee is clear that the most critical need to ensure a universal LTSS system in California is a model of financing that is transparent, that's easily understood and sustainable, and one that has strong policymaker and public support. And really appreciate Sarah's comments about the work that's underway to explore a number of models that might fit the bill here. We do appreciate the work that's already been done by the administration, as both Kevin and Eric have said, and other leaders to analyze approaches and models for a new program that benefits older adults and people with disabilities. And we know how dynamic this environment is. We also understand the need for continued exploration of models that maximize existing resources, but propose new palatable and sustainable revenue streams. And we want to see how all this work will result in that new program that accomplishes its intended outcome. Concurrent, however, with that continued exploration is a need for making a business case to the general public and policymakers regarding the urgency and the anticipated and known adverse consequences that Kevin addressed of not addressing this challenge at this moment in time. And a public education campaign will resonate with Californians across the board, as many are already facing a severe financial burden of the cost of long-term care. And those who are not now, we all know, can expect to at some point in the future. And this includes Californians of all ages, not just older adults. My final point, and this is specifically articulated in the report, is that the Impact Committee's specific request is that by January 2025, the California Health and Human Services Agency, in partnership with other relevant agencies and departments, will identify a list of viable funding mechanisms for a statewide LTSS benefit and present it to the Impact Committee in the first meeting of 2025. So thank you for listening to our covering of this issue. And back to you, Kevin.
Thanks so much, Nancy and Eric. So that's one of the 2 big priorities that we're asking for the administration to focus on. The second priority is preventing and ending older adult homelessness. And I'm going to kick it to Kathleen to cover that.
Thank you, Kevin. As the state ages, we know that the state is also becoming more diverse. And just to note, the cumulative structural disadvantages of BIPOC older adults just means that there is more of a challenge for housing. And it was good to hear Secretary Moss, who both recognized the burden for older adults, the disproportionate nature of the impact of housing burden for older adults, as well as urgency and note about prevention and action. We have seen, and I'm sure we all can repeat this, that homelessness for people 50 and older is the largest growing segment of Californians experiencing homelessness, and that Californians age 65 and older have experienced a dramatic increase of homelessness since 2017. And we've outlined before, but just again, to reiterate that we really see housing rental burden is a key component of that, as well as inadequate supply of affordable housing, access to accessible housing throughout the life course, and then stable housing as well. And we certainly appreciate the efforts that the state has made and the investments the state has made to reduce homelessness, but there have been few targeted programs for older adults. And I just want to note that obviously once on the street for an older adult, it's harder to get off the street and get back into housing. And part of that is because living on the street just exacerbates comorbidity and can really raise dramatically those comorbidities as being unhoused is both a psychological and a physical burden for older adults. The proposed delays in funding of both the Home Safe and housing and disability advocacy programs, we think will put at risk all the progress that has been made to date. We, again, really would urge the CDA to focus on prevention. Statewide rental subsidy programs for older adults and disabled Californians will help to keep people maintained in their housing. In the last impact report, we did urge the CDA with BCSH to create timelines for deliverables for research on rental subsidies programs, and we have not seen progress on that to date. We just note that the longer the state delays, the more difficult and acute the problem becomes. And we urge the state and the CDA in particular to really seek statewide solutions to address this statewide crisis for older adults. We also believe that there needs to be more of an emphasis on financial stability overall for older adults. The recession, of course, saw SSI and SSP reduce benefits, which push more older adults and people with disabilities into poverty. But at the same time, rents were increasing, and certainly we've seen the rise of inflationary costs to consumer goods. We applaud the state efforts to recently bring the benefits back to pre-recession levels, but still we're not at a level where SSI and SSP are at the FPL. So increasing that that benefit so that people have greater financial stability, we think is a key component to maintaining housing for older adults. The committee in particular is asking the department for a plan to increase SSI and SSP benefits to FFPL levels in the next 3 to 5 years, as well as a plan afterwards to raise that to the Elder Equality Index, which we believe will dramatically increase the financial stability for low-income Californians, which will be a significant tool to ameliorating the homeless crisis of older adults in California. And I will pass it back to Kevin.
Thanks so much, Kathleen. So you heard there from our last two presentations, the two key areas that we would like to see that focus on, and then our specific recommendations for action that can be taken in the next year that will set us up for success over time. Within both of those issues, equity is an important principle and one of the reasons why we've picked those two issues. So I'd like Eric Harris to talk more about the importance of equity to the Master Plan for Aging.
Yes, thank you so much, Kevin. Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Harris, he, him pronouns, and I'm the Director of Public Policy at Disability Rights California and also on the Impact Committee. Equity must be a part of everything that we do with the Master Plan for Aging. I know that several speakers have already talked a little bit about equity in their presentations, and that's crucial. It's really important, and I'm really proud that equity has been a part of this discussion from the very beginning, and it really does have a special impact in California because of how diverse our state is. Equity that most people think about involves race and ethnicity, which of course is such an important and significant identifying factor for individuals who older adults and people with disabilities. And we know that older adults who are Black, Indigenous, and other people of color do not receive the same services, supports needed as those who are white, and experience levels of discrimination that are unique to them and their circumstances. So that's a really important aspect, and I think that the master plan is identifying some of those potential challenges and the challenges for older adults and people of color to get in-home supports, to get housing. As we know, folks who are unhoused, who are older adults, are often people of color disproportionately, and so keeping that in consideration as we're thinking about how to best serve these communities, figuring out ways to do that in a thoughtful way that is both acknowledging their status as being an older adult, as being a person with a disability, but also as a person of color. All of these intersectional identities are really important and impactful for the communities that we're talking about serving. In addition to race, we must also continue to lift up older adults with disabilities, older adults who are part of the LGBTQIA plus community, older adults in rural areas who might have different income levels. All of these areas are part of an equity analysis that are crucial for us to continue to examine as we're doing this work. Master Plan for Aging has acknowledged in its work and research that there are gaps. Many underrepresented groups experience discrimination at a number of intersections, and it's important that we think about where these gaps are and how we can best address these gaps. Some of the priorities, as Kevin pointed out earlier, especially at these times now, acknowledging the fiscal environment here in California, knowing that now over the last couple of years and then going into next year, the state budget appears to be in a space where it is going to be difficult to add new services, of course. Many of us who are in policy spaces have experienced that now, working with budget staffers and ledge staffers and others. But I just think that it's crucial that as we want to continue to be a leader on serving older adults, those with disabilities, that we really think about the most vulnerable, and the most vulnerable folks in all of these categories are going to be older adults with disabilities, often at intersections of race and gender, and at lower income levels, especially those who have experienced homelessness or are housing insecure. And so, those are all crucial points, and we want to make sure that as we move forward and continue to act appropriately based on the information that we have, that we continue to prioritize the most vulnerable, and that we lift them up, but also that we work directly with the communities that we're talking about, and working with organizations, working with impacted folks to get their perspectives, so that we can come up with the best solutions to move forward to help out in an inclusive way. So I'm looking forward to that part as we move forward.
Thanks, Eric. And so we're going to pass it to Sarita to wrap up.
Great. Well, excuse me. Good morning, and it's a pleasure to be here today. Thanks, Kevin. So I'm Sarita Mohanty. I am serve as the president and CEO of the SCAN Foundation, and as always, a pleasure to be part of this Impact Committee. And thank you to all my Impact Committee colleagues for their comments. So I'm going to just briefly summarize and reinforce some of the items that were discussed in today's dialogue with the Impact Committee and about this report. You know, as Kevin stated, and when he began the conversation, and what Eric has so eloquently reinforced, equity must continue to be central to the MPA implementation going forward to address those long-standing disparities in care for older Californians of color, those with disabilities, those living in geographically underserved communities, and older adults who identify as LGBTQIA+. And ensuring representation and really engaging people with lived experience in creating solutions is essential to addressing the current disparities and truly building what we're calling a California for all. We know that many older adults lack meaningful access to LTSS, the long-term services and supports. We talked about the forgotten middle. It's a population very unlikely to qualify for Medi-Cal, but may not have the sufficient resources to pay for the housing and care options that they need or want. And there's especially this vulnerable subset of the forgotten middle population that includes 1 in 8 Californian Medicare beneficiaries, most people of color who are near dual. These are Medicare beneficiaries just over the income eligibility for Medi-Cal. Near duals often have similar health and care needs as those who are Medi-Cal eligible, but lack the options for paying for LTSS to support those needs, furthering the disparities in care. So, and you know, we've heard before, but want to reinforce that national analysis of the forgotten middle made by NORC showed that Black and Hispanic older adults have fewer financial resources and greater barriers to aging in place. And these are there are widening gaps among Black and Hispanic middle income older adults around home ownership, home equity, and financial assets. The other thing that I just want to summarize and mention is that we heard from Secretary Moss and from others, and Kathleen and others, that the critical need to address the housing crisis and safe, affordable housing is vital for access to LTSS, but 6 out of 10 older renter households in California really struggle at this point to afford housing. This struggle to pay housing costs increases as California renters age. And then if we think about older adults of color, they're more likely to be at the highest risk of rent unaffordability and homelessness as compared to white counterparts. So while there is now much wider recognition of the gaps in our system, I think due in large part to this MPA, this blueprint, there still remains considerable work ahead. We can't really go backwards at this point. During the budget shortfall, historical investments in LTSS and aging services must be preserved while strategizing to strengthen the system for the future. And then I think what we want to also recognize is that the MPA implementation must now shift to realize 2 critical goals of the MPA, which is that really pose significant risk to equitable aging. And one is building that home care system for all and ending adult homelessness. And with the shift, the legislature and the administration need to focus less on kind of these one-time piecemeal solutions and more on the long-term structural reforms that improve the lives of our older adults and people with disabilities from both now and in the future. And this is why we recommend, among other recommendations, a firmer commitment for developing that plan for sustainable funding for the LTSS system reforms and in addressing adult homelessness. I think we also, in the CDA's annual report on the MPA, we recommend that the state also provide a summary of completed initiatives and an update on the ongoing initiatives where progress has not been completed. So we'd like to reinforce that as well. And, you know, again, I'm just so proud. I mean, California's work on the MPA continues to be the gold standard nationwide. And it's a testament of this collective work of stakeholders and government that the momentum for MPA continues to grow across states and federally. So the committee just again looks forward to working with the legislature and the administration to advance equitable aging for all. So thank you.
So thank you again to Susan and team for giving us this time to present the report. And we'll look forward to sharing the written report with you and with all of the MPA stakeholders.
Thank you all again. And we are the gold standard, all of us, our collective work, and clearly a lot of work has gone into this response. And I just want to thank you again for rolling up your sleeves, working together. I know you meet regularly between these meetings and you give a lot of time that we don't see. And, you know, we from the outset said this is a report that doesn't sit on a shelf. That means the master plan report. It also means the annual report. And so this continuous dialogue that we have year round about the plan, you know, that it wasn't just the issuance in January of the annual report, that now in April, we're having this conversation. We'll have it again in July, and we'll just keep talking about the real issues. So thank you all very much. And thank you for presenting, you know, bringing to life the document that we'll be taking a look at and distributing later in the day. So we now will turn it over. We have two representatives from the Health and Human Services Agency. We have Marco Meach and Darcy Delgado with us today. And Marco, let's hear from you next. Thank you.
Well, I just, you know, I was just in listening mode to kind of absorb and had the chance to read the report yesterday. I think that this truly is a best practice around how we think about engaging stakeholders in the development processes, and the fact that you all have spent so much time thinking about this has been great. I guess, am I okay to ask a few questions if that's okay with folks? Because I think there's so much great stuff, and I just want to dig into some of the pieces. If would that be okay, or is that go afoul of any rules? I don't know.
I have no objection to that. Please. It's a conversation. That's what we strive for.
Well, I guess just kind of pulling apart so first, I really appreciated the narrowness in the two areas, because I think that is tremendously helpful. And thank you again for reiterating the importance of keeping the investments. I think that is going to be important for all of us to continue to hear, both within the administration and within the legislature, as we begin to navigate this next budget. So I really want to applaud you for narrowing, and I think that's helpful for us, because I think it gives us clear direction as to what you all think would be really, really beneficial. I think on the home care system side, wanted to kind of ask a few questions related to kind of what I read with regards to the proposal. One, I wanted to get a sense of how we begin to think about the terminology related to what we're actually talking about, because I think we're using, you know, to some extent, we're using home and community-based services. In some instances, we're using LTSS. In some instances, we're looking at, you know, home care system. How do we begin to think, how do you all begin to think, help us think through, like, what is the right terminology as to how we think about this? And how do we define what we're ultimately talking about here? Because I am a little bit worried that, like, we're not talking about, like, we're not all talking about the same thing. So it would be good to help me understand, like, what should be our nomenclature as we begin to think about the work for 2025 as you've requested, so that we have a clear sense of, you know, what does LTSS really look? Is it LTSS? Is it home and community-based services? Is it, you know, home care system? And what is that? How do we ultimately define that? So that would be first question that I think would be helpful for me to just kind of grapple with.
You started with a nice and easy one, huh, Marco? I mean, I can start, and of course, other impact committee members can jump in. But as a broad community, I don't think we found the right words to communicate the importance of this issue. I think different terms are used in different places. And I think that that makes sense to a degree, that there's different audiences for these messages that we're taking out. We rarely work with individuals and families who are saying, what I most need in my life is LTSS.
Right.
That's not a term that people are using when they're trying to first figure out what they're doing and what they need. If they're a long-term user, if this is a lifetime of services, they might now be familiar with the policies and use a language that matches more the policy side. So I don't think we have a great answer to that. What we know from the work we do in communities is as people get older and their needs change, they tell us they want to stay home. And so that's why we often use the concept of home and home care. And when they say that, they're thinking about a whole array of supports that will help them be in their community. They may not mean literally their home. They might mean I want to stay in my neighborhood or I want to stay near my family.
Right.
They might not mean only services in my home. They might need services in the community, like an adult day health or employment supports that are about, those are things that help them stay at home. So it's not just about care in the home. But I think we're all aligned on that. The problem we want to solve is too many people get to this point in their life or the life of a family member and they can't afford the care, whether the care that they're going to use and need is at home,
Right.
whether it's going to be in an institution on a short term, a long term, they just can't pay for it. So we want to create a system where they can pay for it. And so far, we've built our long-term care system with a bias towards care in the institutions. As we build new ways of providing that care, we think the bias should be for home care. The bias should be that it's easiest for people to get care at home rather than easiest for them to get and pay for that care in an institution.
That's helpful. So I think what I'm hearing is that there is no one definition that is going to encompass kind of everything. I think from a lay person or the average person, Lily, the idea of home care is that it doesn't necessarily have to be my home, but I want to be able to live in the community of my choice, in the setting of my choice. And kind of the broad spectrum of home and community-based services and LTSS, like those are kind of a mushmash of different ideas. And I think is helpful. And maybe from our perspective, and Susan and Sarah and Darcy, we need to start thinking about how we anchor the conversation around the person with the idea that it's the home, and then forget the rest of the jargon and kind of let let others, kind of the experts who write about this, let them figure out what that means from their individual perspectives, but anchor this in the idea of the home. Does that, Kevin, am I hearing that correctly? Just so that I can figure out how we begin to shape some of our work and thinking across the agency, not just and we have created a community of practice around this internally that has CDPH and DHCS and social services and DDS and DOR and aging to talk about like, what does LTSS look like? So I think that this is, and we've been trying to figure out how do we get ourselves all on the same nomenclature to think about I think we agree on the problem. It's just making sure that we're all are driving towards the same goal, the same vision ultimately is an important piece too. Okay. I also wanted to kind of piggyback on the piece related to kind of the LTSS services statewide and removing. I think there was a piece around removing policy barriers and building kind of the infrastructure. Is there an opportunity to kind of at least delve into like what are, from your all's perspective, some of the key low-hanging fruit policy barriers in terms of that? I get the need for a financing mechanism. That is kind of the broader picture, but help me maybe better understand the piece around the policy barriers. And is there a way to further define what those are so that we can begin to think about how do we collectively on our side begin to chip away at some of those policy barriers in a more holistic way?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for the group, but I suspect that's worthy of a longer conversation, probably with more of our staff that are more in the deep weeds of those policy barriers and the low-hanging fruit pieces that could change now.
So I think we would, well, I defer to Susan, but I certainly would welcome some follow-up on this, just to like, and perhaps, Sarah, I don't mean to volunteer you, but if perhaps you or others can get in with staff and just really dig into like, what are, like, can we come up with a list of those so that we can begin to think through, are there things that we can do on our end to chip away at those? I think would be super helpful.
Absolutely. I'm happy to follow up on that, Mark.
Okay, and then, sorry, I had a bunch of notes and I'm just making sure I just go through them. Also on the LTSS piece, just regarding different models, I know we've talked obviously about what some of the other states are doing. And obviously we've talked to some of you about some of our thinking related to Medicare and what we're thinking there. That particular piece, obviously we'd love to engage further with you all in a much more intentional way. I also think that that is not like the end all be all. It's just one solution to a bigger problem, right? It's like, we'll need to have a menu of solutions to think about what this looks like. But I think it would also be helpful to understand if there are other things that you're seeing that other states or other countries are doing that could be something we look at here. I think we'd welcome kind of, I know we've had some conversations about this, but I think that would be another thing to kind of ultimately consider. So those were some of the things. Oh, on the housing side, I think one of the questions, one thing that I've been thinking a lot about is, flexible housing pools and how do you think about flexible housing pools? I think in some other states, they've been able to cobble together some stuff. I know that LA has done some really interesting work in that. Are there any, and maybe this is for Kathleen or others, are there any thoughts or is there any best practices or thoughts around how a flexible housing pool could potentially be leveraged, particularly amongst the older adult population to support them? Is that something to be thinking about? I just love your kind of perspective on that as well.
I don't know if, I don't think I have a good answer for that. I think that there are other state funding, pipelines that if they could be open, for instance, we have a supernova specifically for family housing, but we don't have anything similar for older adult housing. So it just means
I see.
it's much more
Okay.
challenging to get funding for affordable housing projects. And then there are issues around federal limits in terms of mixing family and senior housing. And if we were able to do a demonstration project that could allow for intergenerational housing, so you could have families, seniors, workforce housing that could be funded through one mechanism, but that would take a change at the federal level, which I'd be all for going and talking to HUD about that. But in other states that have tried that, they have had enough land to actually condoize all the funding compartments. So you had a senior building, but you could co-locate all of the programming, for instance. But if you really wanted to do something that would increase intergenerational housing, we'd have to have a demonstration project basically in the state of California that HUD would agree to.
Got it. Okay. And we are having some conversations with HUD, so it might be worthwhile to think about, are there opportunities on this given some of our work around housing and health? And I think, we would welcome some of your thoughts, to be honest with you. Like, are there specific things we would want to ask HUD? So even if you could jot down some ideas, this doesn't have to be perfect, and it could just be a white piece of paper with some, handwritten notes that you can pass on to Darcy and Sarah. We'd love to kind of get your best thinking about what we could push HUD on and what a demonstration could potentially look like.
Oh, I'd love to do that. Thanks.
And then I just want to say thank you to all of you, but particularly the comments that Eric made around equity and really needing to continue to anchor in equity. This is a really big deal for the secretary. It is kind of the thing that continues to weave through all of the work that we're doing across the agency. And so I just want you all to know, and I appreciate how much you've really anchored this report and continue to push us to think about really meaningful conversation on the equity side. So just wanted to again express my thanks. This is really helpful. We look forward to continuing to engage on our side. I know that we did print this out for the secretary, and he did read it on his plane ride into Sacramento this morning. He shared, so he is tracking very closely, and we just really appreciate the continued partnership. Again, this is a best practice around how we further engage with folks and have you help us think about some of these pieces.
Great. Marco, thank you so much for joining us, and for the secretary for catching up on the plane on the report. And Darcy, thank you too. And I'll just reiterate the value of this document. We were able to have Marco representing the agency. We had Secretary Moss, but not everyone can be present for the impact committee, and there are other stakeholder settings. So this is such a useful tool. I can promise you that Sarah and I will share this with all of the department directors and our agency colleagues in housing, transportation, labor, and more, so that they get to read up on input from stakeholders, and they're not only hearing from us on these topics. And I can assure you that other leaders in this administration really value stakeholder input. And so this is a very effective way to communicate the highest priorities of our stakeholder community in a very well thought out way. And so this work will live through other stakeholder bodies, and certainly, MPA wise, Elder Justice, the Disability and Aging Community Living Advisory Committee, it informs other work, not just the impact committee. So thank you again. Thank you, Marco, for joining us. Darcy, stay as long as you can and drop off as you need to. Our next agenda item is we're going to hear from Sarah Steenhausen about the latest thinking, something I'm personally very excited about with our Equity Advisory Committee that, of course, preceded the Master Plan for Aging and continues to support the master plan, but a new development out of our Equity Advisory Committee. So Sarah, please take over from here.
Thank you so much, Susan, and thank you all for such a very, very well thought out report back to us, and just a great conversation. We really appreciate all you do. If you could, thank you so much, Kelly. This question, I think this is a perfect kind of flow to this conversation. Building off of your really valuable input on the importance of elevating equity in everything we do in the MPA. And as Susan noted, the Equity Advisory Committee started as the Equity Work Group in the formation of the Master Plan for Aging. And they really played an important role in informing stakeholders' thinking, as well as the administration's thinking, on the importance of uplifting equity throughout all 5 bold goals. Since that time, the work of the committee has somewhat shifted, and we have been talking with the committee about how to really think about, how to focus their efforts now that we are underway in implementation of the plan. We have 6 different stakeholder advisory committees, and we're really proud of the work that they do, bringing focused recommendations that are elevated at the day of action for consideration in the next iteration of the MPA. But we've been talking with our colleagues on the Equity Advisory Committee about how we might actually do a better job as a state of integrating lived experience in the Master Plan for Aging to inform all 5 bold goals. Because, all of our stakeholder committees, there are some consumers that represent, but primarily it might be advocates or stakeholders, but not people themselves who are not connected to the policy community, real people in the community. So this was our key question that we elevated and brought forward a concept for creating an aging and disability lived experience advisory board that would inform all of our stakeholder committees and, more importantly, all of the state and legislature in how we think about the MPA and embedding equity throughout. So next slide, please. So we had a really wonderful conversation with our colleagues on the Equity Advisory Committee and came up with this concept about developing an aging and disability lived experience advisory board. The idea is that the Equity Advisory Committee would help the state Department of Aging formulate and think through the plans for how we might structure an aging and disability lived experience advisory board. Ensuring that we have representation from older adults, people with disabilities, the diverse communities that represent these populations, as well as caregivers, and thinking about how we can structure conversations with people to help inform our thinking in the master plan. So the concept is that the Lived Experience Advisory Board would be kind of facilitated by the Equity Advisory Committee. The Equity Advisory Committee would then take the input and the feedback through the conversations that they've structured with the Lived Experience Advisory Board. And they would then funnel kind of the high-level issues, considerations, policy elements that are uplifted in these conversations and bring it to all of the relevant committees that we work with. Of course, Impact and all of you, but as well as our Disability and Aging Community Living Advisory Committee, the Elder and Disability Justice Coordinating Council, our Aging and Disability Research Partnership, and the Alzheimer's Advisory Committee. So we feel like this is a really impactful way to work with people and really elevate the issues that they are bringing to us and identify the issues and the solutions that we can then bring forward as we implement the MPA. And again, this is kind of the concept is this is the master plan is a living document. So we will be able to take what we learn and what we hear and act on it. And of course, as we update the master plan every 2 years, we would incorporate that input. So there's a number of ways that we could structure this. And I think right now we're very mindful of the need to do this the right way. We've engaged with some of our state colleagues, particularly at the Interagency Council on Homelessness. They just recently stood up a lived experience advisory board. So it's been great kind of learning from how they've approached it. We are also looking at different consultants that might support us in this effort and identifying the resources to do that. We definitely think we need to have a very well thought out process, and we will be engaging our Equity Advisory Committee partners as we stand up this effort to get their input and feedback in it as well. And we are hoping that when it comes time for the day of action, we can really announce and promote the establishment of this lived experience advisory board, or what we're calling ADLIB. So it's a perfect acronym, I think. So with that, if we could go to the next slide, please. We'd really, really welcome your feedback now. What you see as the purpose of this, how it might be structured, thinking through membership, and any other questions or concerns or considerations that you might have to help inform our thinking these next few months as we really dig in and try and advance this work. So I will just open it up to anybody that has questions.
Sarah, I have my hand up. I don't know if you
Oh,
can
good. Thank you.
Yeah,
Now I
no,
can
no.
see. I was like, I was trying to find my
Yeah,
gallery.
no, it's all good. You know, and you don't have to bring this up, but there was the visual, the with the arrows, the little map. One thing I noticed, and maybe you spoke to this and I missed it, but I saw that the arrow was going up to the from this ADLIB to the equity count. But are there, I imagine there's going to be situations or instances where you're going to want to, the arrow should be kind of bi-directional, right?
That's a great point.
So because in essence, we if there's an idea or a policy or a program that is being considered or advanced in the MPA, it would be a great opportunity to, we think about co-design and bringing that lived experience into the future of that program or policy. So I would encourage you to.
Wonderful feedback. Yes, I love that. That's very, very good point, and we will make it a bi-directional arrow for sure. Thank you, Sarita. Karen.
Yeah, thanks so much for this, Sarah. I think it's great. And I guess, so we have been working with the Department of Healthcare Services to stand up their Medi-Cal Member Advisory Committee over the last year. And before the committee actually started, there was a pretty robust process around design with stakeholders. And there's a whole like report that came out of that on sort of best practices that were identified, which the California Healthcare Foundation funded that. So I think they have it on their website. If they don't, I'll find it and send it to you. But I think a couple of things that came out of that. One is that it's really important for, I think, engagement for the committee to be engaging with the department and with the state at a very high level, like in your org chart kind of thing. And I think one of the keys to success of that has been the directors at every meeting, right? She leads every meeting. And I think it says a lot, right, about what that group means and how central they are and their perspective is. And I know that, you know, the master plan is cross-agency, right? So I'm not sure what would be the right place, but I just say that to say, I think it's really important that this be a group that is a direct line to sort of the top decision makers. Otherwise, I think there's a lot of experiences, you know, where we have these kinds of groups and people are frustrated. They're like, what am I doing here? No, nobody hears what I say anyway. So really, I think where you position the group is super important to success. I think the other thing is just a recognition of, in order to set people up for success, to be able to meaningfully engage in feedback on the programs you're developing and that kind of thing is really intensive work. And I think just thinking out how you build that in from a resources perspective, if you're working with consultants, et cetera. So on the Medi-Cal side, you know, they're like every single member has a prep call with like the folks who are staffing it to make sure they have their questions answered and they feel fully prepared and, you know, those kinds of things. There's sort of, we were also exploring like a, you know, peer mentor buddy system with folks who have more experience being on these kinds of committees, like working with folks who are newer. And I think a lot of that really needs to be built in again, so that people can really participate. So I would just offer that as something to think about as you're thinking about what it will take to stand this up from the beginning, to just make sure that that's a part of the planning. And I'm happy to talk more offline if there's more on the Medi-Cal side that we can share about our experience there.
Super, super helpful. Thank you so much. And we will definitely track down that DHCS report or that was funded through Healthcare Foundation. And I think you're absolutely right. Those are some of the questions we've had too, is how we can support people in this work. Knowing that they're not going to want to just come in and start talking about, you know, some wonky policy issue, you know, how we can do it so that they feel prepared, that they feel heard, and that I love this idea of the mentor system too. So lots of really good input, and we'll definitely be reaching back out to you for more insights that you might have. So thank you for that. Other thoughts or questions from committee members as well? Something that I also really resonates is the concept of ensuring that state leadership is the audience of this. And I think we also want to think about how our legislative colleagues might also be. You know, we've heard repeatedly that in the day of action, the most impactful part of that was hearing from people. And we heard that from state policymakers. Those stories and those individuals, those are what you remember when you leave these types of meetings. And when you think about policy development, you think of those people. So I do think there is true power in that. And so really appreciate how we might integrate, you know, state leadership into the body of this. All right, well, thank you all for your input on that. We will keep you updated. If you all also have any feedback to us on, if you want to send an email about any consultancies that you would recommend for this work, we obviously want to use the support of entities that have experience in engaging with diverse communities across the state. That would be great. So thank you for this time, and I will turn it back over to Susan.
Great, thank you, Sarah. And that's an excellent, and Karen, thank you for that too. It's through your work there, you know, that's something we weren't aware of. We've talked to the Interagency Council on Homelessness about you know, getting input from them about their lived experience advisory board, but that's an avenue we'll definitely pursue, and that's why I'm so glad you're on this impact committee. And a good segue to our next agenda item, which is the 2024 Cal for All Ages Day of Action on October 8th. And Sarah reminding us of the panel discussions from about a year and a half ago now, and how we want to really lean into that in the upcoming second annual, but it's been 2 years. I don't know if you still call it second annual, but anyhow, I'm going to turn it over to Jackie Tompkins, who's going to share with us where we are today and to get some feedback from all of you at this key juncture as we start to finalize our agenda and the planning for the day. Jackie.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Susan. Thank you all for that conversation with regards to the lived experience advisory board that we're proposing for California's master plan for aging. For those of you who might not know me, my name is Jackie Tompkins. I serve as the Master Plan for Aging Project Director here at the California Department of Aging. And I'm going to walk through just a few logistical items as it relates to our upcoming day of action. But I'm also going to share with you essentially just some of the planning to date, and also give you a sneak peek on where we're looking for that agenda to go. And I would really value your input and feedback on that proposed agenda and flow of the day to ensure that the day reaches our goals of really hearing from consumers, providers, organizations who serve older adults, people with disabilities, and their caregivers. So we can develop master plan for aging initiatives for the next 2 years that are really responsive and reflect current realities, but can also move the needle and progress on issues that matter most. For those of you who are not aware, and hopefully you all already have a calendar invite, please let me know if you do not have a calendar invite for this date. But we are looking to host California for All Ages and Abilities Day of Action this fall, Tuesday, October 8th, here in Sacramento. We do have a website up. Right now, it's kind of save the date notice on the website, but please note that we hope to make registration available towards the tail end of May and early June for individuals on this committee to participate, as well as a broader network of providers, consumers, and our public members. We also do want to thank our philanthropic partners for supporting this event and enabling us to reflect on the success of California's master plan for aging to date, but also to talk about the current pressing issues that we need to also address moving forward. So going to the next slide. So California's master plan for aging and our day of action is, again, really designed to help us focus on the highest priority issues facing Californians today. We are able to do this event every other year to ensure that we can create initiatives, again, that are timely, responsive, and are also progressing towards the 5 bold goals of California's master plan for aging. We are also previous convenings and the core essence of the master plan for aging, really looking to continue embedding equity in our convening, as well as that lived experience component as well. At this event, we will also be hearing from our MPA stakeholder committees to gather those priority recommendations that will, again, inform the MPA initiatives for 25-26. We also see this event as an opportunity to, again, celebrate the progress we have made to date, but also we're at that halfway point of implementing California's master plan for aging. So it's an opportunity for us to renew the shared commitment that we all have to California's master plan for aging. And this is sustaining efforts, reinvigorating efforts among diverse partners and stakeholders in this event. And then also this serves as an opportunity to invite diverse partners to really embrace that whole of government, whole of community, whole of society approach by California continuing to be a leader in this space and inviting national leadership as well as state leadership, administration, and our legislatures. So on this next slide, I wanted to just give you a preview of the day that we have planned. And then again, at the end of the segment, I do welcome any feedback that you might have with regards to this preview of the day. Grounding our day in equity and lived experience is something that we want to have at the forefront. We want to start our day with the why. Why are we doing this work? And I know me personally, when I attend conferences and I'm able to hear the stories and be able to lean into that lived experience, it allows me to reflect on the people behind some of these data points and really understand from their perspective challenges that they face on a day-to-day basis. And it makes it a little bit more concrete of how we can move forward to solve such issues, barriers, and challenges as well. So we are proposing that we start the day with hearing directly from the consumers, older adults, people with disabilities, as well as caregivers, to share that lived experience, to be able to illustrate through their stories, barriers, and challenges, and also talk about successes in some of the services and resources that we have brought forth. We also see that this is also an opportunity where we can introduce the topic that Sarah just talked about related to the Age and Disability Lived Experience Advisory Board. So we're hopeful that we will be able to speak to the concept of that, but even better yet, be able to have some members of that advisory board join us at that meeting. We're looking to have, some of you actually might have attended the 2022 Day of Action, where we had the various MPA stakeholder committees essentially do a report out on their recommendations. We're looking to shift gears a little bit. While we definitely will still hear the recommendations from the various MPA stakeholder committees, we want to kind of weave it into more of a conversation, a fireside chat of two primary panels that are really focused on building a home and community care system that works for all. And within these two panels, we're looking to elevate key topics that we have been talking about, including housing, financing, navigation, workforce. And so all the components of creating systems change will be woven into the discussions. And we do want to comprise those panels that are discussing these issues to be from various groups, including, our MPA stakeholder committee members, such as Impact and others, consumers, members of our legislature, administration, and also our state agencies. We're also proposing that following the two panels, after each panel, that we also have the opportunity to engage the public, others in attendance, to be a part of the conversation as well, and talk directly to the panel to reinforce elements that might have been shared, but they can also use this as an opportunity to bring forth additional components or concepts that need to also be elevated. So it's also bridging the panel with also the other attendees that will be at the meeting. While equity is going to be definitely woven throughout our conversation, and also the intersections between aging and disability will naturally come up as we go throughout the day with the earlier agenda items. We did want to have a dedicated segment of the agenda where we talk about aging and aligning aging and disability. And then at the end of the day, we're aiming to close out the day with a conversation with some of our California policy and budget staff. So that's where our planning is to date. I'm very open, and I know with Susan and Sarah and others on the call, kind of hearing from Impact Committee members how your first initial reactions to this preview. And also maybe if you have some thoughts and inputs on the two panels and the structure of them, or even like the focus areas of the panel, that can also help us in plugging in specific people, topics, etc. So I welcome your input there to, again, ensure that we have a really meaningful and engaging day where we are hearing issues, but also problem solving issues through multiple perspectives. So I invite you to share your thoughts.
I'll jump in to get us started.
Thanks, Kevin.
I I think it's great that you're considering that you're doing another day like this, and I think it's great that you're bringing the focus on one of the key issues that the Impact Committee has identified. I think that's appropriate. We need that kind of focus. We need all the committees to be thinking about how their work feeds into particularly the home care and LTSS issue. So I think that's great. And in terms of how to structure those panels, I think it would be important for one of them to focus on financing and to dig deep on what the needs are in the community and what some of the policy options are that we should be considering to address financing and affordability.
Thank you, Kevin. I jotted that down. How about for others, when you look at that day, how does that resonate with you in terms of, even being on a panel or hearing from that panel? How can it be most beneficially structured in a way that, again, we can talk to each other, but also be able to have groups of people maybe hear this information, understand this information, so they can also become champions in this space. Hi, Kathleen.
Hi, thank you, Jackie. I am also really excited that this convening is happening again. It was so helpful last time. And I love the idea of doing panel discussions and also bringing community members who receive benefits to come and provide their story to really humanize the work that we all do and give us that perspective. I think the one thing that I would say would be really helpful for me as someone who was an attendee last time is perhaps an opportunity to ask panel questions. So having more opportunity for people in the audience to give feedback. And, it was just at that last maybe 15 minutes or so last time that we convened that we had that opportunity. And I think perhaps giving more opportunity for people to ask questions or give feedback would be helpful.
Thank you, Kathleen.
And actually, just to jump in on that, Kathleen, that's exactly what we had envisioned because we sensed that last time. So I think after each panel, we'll have some time to hear from the audience for like an engagement.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, I see Sarah put in the chat, when we talked about two panels, the slide may not have reflected that the two priorities that were discussed this morning about a home care system, the structural reforms, that there will be equal time for housing, preventing and ending older adult homelessness. So whether they're combined or they're two discrete panels, they will have equal time and attention. And that may not have been captured on the slide.
Yeah. Thank you, Susan. Sarita, hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well.
Great. I just was curious. I know, and I think the lived experience, the what you described, I think is going to be so great. I wondered if there would be some opportunity to blend, definitely having the live kind of panels with people, but also maybe even incorporating some of the videos and stories, maybe between breaks or, maybe quick, 20, 30-second perspectives, in between talks. I just think that richness of some of those stories will enhance the Cal for All event.
Okay. Very helpful. Yeah, we're thinking about what are the opportunities to when you walk into the room, you know, get that energy, get that vibe of the why we're here and be able to hear them directly. And even during some of the breaks or the transitions and lunches, what are some opportunities to also have those be coupled with networking, but balanced with also content, because we know that the networking piece is also incredibly important to the attendees as well. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, I was just going to add on to that, Sarita, to that point. This year, we're not funding the creation of a video like we did last year, but we will be asking our partners if they have videos that we might use with your approval, because I think there's so many, you know, I saw a couple at the ASA conference that were produced by Homebridge. I know TSF has done a ton of work in this space too. So we will definitely be following up. And if anybody on the committee has ideas for very impactful videos, we would really welcome that. And of course, we would give attribution to the group that they came from.
Additionally, one thing I've failed to mention is our goal is to be able to, while the MPA committees wouldn't necessarily do a formal report out, like maybe was done in 2022 of their recommendations, recommendations will be woven into the conversation, and we do plan to have the recommendations available to all attendees to reference during the day together. So that was just something I also wanted to elevate, is it might not look exactly how it did in 2022, but we're still getting to that core of hearing directly from MPA Stakeholder Committee members, as well as those in attendance, their priority areas, recommendations, and solutions. But it might just, again, look a little bit different, but everyone will have those materials available to them to reference during the day. We're also looking to start doing some more formal, save the dates more broadly than we have done, beginning in mid-May. So we will have some resources that some of our partners, including our stakeholder committees, can use to outreach to your various networks and also promote the event as well. I did put the website in the link or the chat for those to reference and to follow along, but wanted to let you know that we'll keep building out the website with the registration and the agenda, and also some save the date materials that you all can use as committee members. Any other final thoughts on just some elements of content or process that you would like to ensure that we are including on this day of action? Anything from the last meeting that should come over, or have you been to conferences that you would say, yes, you should have this type of structure? Well, keep them coming if you do. We are available, and you're more than welcome to send us an email or even just kind of request a quick chat, and we will definitely hear your thoughts. But thank you for allowing me time on the agenda to walk you through kind of the proposal and the planning that we're moving forward with. I think having these larger panel discussions where we're hearing diverse perspectives will be very helpful to really illustrate how complex our issues and topics are, but then also it provides us opportunities to talk about solutions from multiple perspectives as well. So that's what I'm really excited about. So appreciate it. And I think from here, I turn it over to Susan. We'll put up some slides for Susan to talk about impact membership, and then we're going to be transitioning to public comment. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you, Jackie. And I think it was said, but I would like to say it again. This would not be possible without the generous support of our Master Plan for Aging funders, who are still with us. And as Kevin said at the opening, in our middle age, if you think of the funders standing up the MPA, so they started their work before it was even launched. They're now 5 years in that they've been funding this, and especially in this fiscal climate that we're in, we could never, ever have anything on this scale without the support of our MPA funders. So thank you, Sarita, and your colleagues for allowing us to continue with this, the Day of Action. So I did want to share with all of you that we have, because of the cadence of our meetings, we'll next meet in the summer, and then our fall meeting will be the Day of Action, so we won't have a fall meeting. So we did want to bring up for you those members of the Impact Committee who will be terming out at the end of this calendar year. So all of your terms will remain through the Day of Action, so you'll all be current members in October for the Day of Action. But did want you to start thinking, we hate to lose these outstanding members, but be giving some thought. One of the strengths of the Impact Committee is the size that we're able to, and it's demonstrated by the report that you produced and your presentation at the start of the meeting. It allows for this group to be nimble and to work well together because of the size. So we are not looking to increase the size of the Impact Committee, but just be thinking of individuals that you would like to recommend. You don't have to do it following today's meeting. We wanted to share the slide today to give you some time to be thinking through this. All members of the Impact Committee are appointed by Secretary Galley, as you all know well, because you were all appointed by the Secretary. So we'll be looking for names and suggestions through the summer and into the early fall, and we'd really like to be able to be pretty close to knowing who will be joining us at the start of the new year. And we'd also like to extend any prospective invitations to prospective members to the Day of Action. So more than likely, they are people who would already attend the Day of Action, but not necessarily so. And then also, really just to lean into the three themes that we have been talking about today, the structural reforms that we are all prioritizing, building a home care system that works for all, preventing and ending older adult homelessness, and continuously committing to equity in all forms. So given that, be thinking of people with particular expertise in those areas that can really strengthen representation on those fronts. So that's just something to take away with you and get the wheels turning, and real informal. Just send us names of anyone you might suggest, or give us a phone call. And like I said, this will play out over the next several months, but start thinking now. Next slide, Jackie. All right. So we've picked up some time here. I did, in the chat, I was reminded, I really don't, I did not like my earlier slide where I just went through rapid fire, all kinds of updates, so rushed. One update that I didn't share, and I'll just take the liberty right now, is we have concluded the state's LGBTQIA+ older adult survey, where we heard from over 4,700 older Californians that those survey responses are now being tabulated and analyzed, and we expect to have some preliminary findings that we can share out as early as June. But there's another piece of the work that continues, and we're incredibly grateful for that. Our foundation partners are supporting focus groups to gather input from the hard to reach LGBTQIA+ population that did not respond to the survey. We're pleased that the overall response was double what we had hoped for. And we still know 4,700 older adults is just a fraction of the population living in our state. And I know all of you on the Impact Committee and your organizations really helped to get the word out. You helped us promote it. Nancy, I want to thank you, especially AARP did just a phenomenal job, but each of you really helped us get the word out. And that's how we were able to get 4,700 more than 4,700 completed responses. But there are still others, in particular, people who do not live in urban areas and may not be associated with strong organizations like Open House and may not have heard about the survey. So our foundation partners will be doing some additional focus groups and have some really important qualitative findings that will only strengthen the survey results. So, my thanks, Kathleen, Open House, you were, an instigator to even, launch the survey, pre-survey, and you've been just a fantastic partner throughout the survey process. So thank you, especially for your leadership. And that was one thing I had forgot to mention. So now we're, Carol, I get to turn it over to you for the public comment period.
Hi, Carol, you're muted.
Oh my goodness, I'm on a roll today. Good morning still. We are moving to our public comment period. And we welcome your comments. We want to remind folks it will be 2 minutes. Attendees joining by phone, please press *9 on your dial pad to have your hand raised in the queue. And those joining by the Zoom webinar, please click your raised hand icon. So we do have Laura Rath. She has raised, Laura has raised her hand. Go ahead, Laura.
Great. Thank you so much, Carol. Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you very much.
Thanks again for this update today. I'm Laura Rath, Vice President of Programs for Archstone Foundation. And at Archstone Foundation, our mission is to improve the health and well-being of older Californians and their caregivers. And our vision is for an equitable, coordinated system of integrated health and social services with a focus on reducing disparities in health outcomes throughout all our work. We're really proud to partner with our foundation colleagues across the state to support the work of the Master Plan for Aging. And I wanted to highlight a few of the important issues we heard today. As the Little Hoover report notes, the Master Plan is an enormous and complicated undertaking, and we add our applause to these efforts to achieve bold goals. To get there, we need good data and clear milestones and targets so we can track and understand our progress. Having that clear data will also assist us, I think, in the foundation and philanthropic sector to best assist the state and the committee members in these important efforts. And additionally, we wanted to voice our full support for the recommendation to identify a list of viable funding mechanisms for long-term care financing that would provide a critical path forward to reduce disparities and achieve equity. Equally, prioritizing efforts to address homelessness among older adults is critical. So thank you. We know there's much work to do, and we're so proud we can partner with you in this.
Thank you so much, Laura. This is our public comment section of the agenda. If you would like to give us a comment, please raise your hand on your icon in Zoom or *9 on your phone. Give it a couple more beats. We've had a packed agenda today. Lots of things to think about. Okay. One more, we will give it a couple more minutes for anyone for a public comment. Please do remember, should you have a comment after this meeting, please email the comment to us at engage@aging.ca.gov. Engage. engage@aging.ca.gov. We welcome those throughout the day, anytime.
So Carol, it looks like we don't have any more public comments and there's no harm in ending a meeting early. So I will just thank all of our members. I will members of the Impact Committee as well as the public who have joined us. And I will note that we will be working on our response. We're trying to craft a great acronym for it's the Impact Report response. So we will acknowledge receipt of your report today. We'll give it some thought and we will get back to you in a few weeks with a written response to keep that conversation going. Please continue your fantastic advocacy on the budget and policy issues that are before the legislature currently. We appreciate so much hearing from you about what is most important to you, to you individually, to your organizations, and to the Master Plan for Aging broadly. So continue to keep us informed as things move through the legislative and budget process. And we appreciate all of you joining us today and taking the time to participate. And our next meeting will be held Thursday, July 25th from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. Thank you all, and thank you to the CDA staff and agency staff who joined us today. We appreciate you all. Have a great rest of your day.